So here's our goals for today. Define what lean healthcare is, understand the underlying principles, and then describe the Theta Care results and the management system, which is, by the way, the secret sauce to the transformation is the management system. So I want to start with some results, because the only reason that we would consider using the lean methodology is to deliver better results for our patients. That's the only reason. All right, so what do we mean by lean in healthcare? And by the way, my recommendation to you would be that you never use the word lean. Okay? Certainly never use the word lean with frontline workers like nurses and doctors, because all it will do is make them mad. Okay? So just don't use it. But for our conversation today, this is what we're talking about. Okay? Lean in healthcare, the Toyota production system applied to healthcare, that's what we're talking about. But I'm not suggesting that you use this as the way to communicate with your caregivers, because they hate this word. And my caregivers hated this word, and so just, remove it from the lexicon. But here's the definition: an organization's cultural commitment. So that means we're going to change the culture of the organization. Many people think lean is a series of tools. I bring this toolbox out, and then I start using these tools, and then we're going to reduce wait time, and we're going to do this. But that's not exactly what it is. Lean is actually a cultural commitment to applying the scientific method to designing, performing, and continuously improving the work performed by teams of people to deliver measurably better value to patients and to other stakeholders. So in that same article from Mayo Clinic Proceedings, we tried to simplify this house into these few principles. And so what I want to do is go through each one of these and give you some examples of what we mean by each one of these principles. Let's start with value creation for patients. So what do we mean by value? What we mean is that the quality and the cost delivery to the customer should be improving at the same time. So some people think that lean is a cost control activity. So if you go into this kind of transformation thinking with the idea that lean is a cost control activity, you will fail miserably. Okay? Lean is not a cost control activity. It's about delivering better value to the patient by taking steps in a process that are non-value added and removing them. Now, some people call that waste. There are lots of different ways we can talk about that, but the reality is that what we're trying to do is take the non-value added steps out of a process and deliver better value. That means that quality should improve and cost should go down. If you're only focused on cost, you won't get the full power of this activity. So one of the things you all have to do is to get everybody on the same page, right? So we need to get the team members, the people that actually deliver the care on the same page. So how do we do that? How do we do that so we can deliver better value to that patient? One of the ways we do that is to make it clear as leaders what we think our people should be working on. Now, I don't know what it is in South Africa, how many metrics you have to report and all that kind of stuff. But in the U.S., we have to report all kinds of things to the federal government, to the state government, to all kinds of places. And the reality is most of those metrics are non-value added to the patient. They actually have no impact on patient care. So our challenge as leaders is to say, what are the measures that really do have an impact on patients? And can we all get together on what those are and start to work together on improving them? So this is what we call True North. This is Theta Care's True North. So these are the things that we're all going to work on together, all 7,700 employees at Theta Care in 7 hospitals. What about continuous improvement? So You know, we've got all these things, right? We got Pareto's and flow charts, and, you know, sometimes we get confused by all that. Does anybody remember what the problem was? And in fact, so do we. So there's a lot of things on this slide, right? But this is the fundamental thinking process of Lean. Plan, do, check, act, or plan, do, study, act. All of the tools, all of the processes, all of that stuff really comes down to this. And when I say, people say, so what is Lean? I said, it's simply scientific method, plan, do, study, act, cycles applied to your daily work. That's all it is. That's all I tell anybody it is. Because that's the thinking that we're using to solve problems. This plan, do, study, act thinking. But we have to make this all visual because it doesn't actually work if you put it in the computer. So here's an example of a visual control board. And here's that triangle I showed you, that data care triangle. This would be the level of the driver metric. So what are you working on this unit that's going to drive to that particular performance measure? Here are a couple of the A3s that they're working on that had either been deployed or they were working on their own problems. And then these are the slips for improvement over here. So every day they meet in front of this board and new ideas are bubbling out of the staff. Okay? And the manager's job is to make sure that those ideas keep coming. This isn't some kind of fancy computer program, by the way. You can see this is handwritten in pencil. That's what you're seeing on this board. Every day people are going up and writing this stuff. How are we actually performing? And it's the nurses that are doing it, technicians, the housekeepers. So what about standard work for administrative and clinical processes? Is standard work a bad word in South Africa? It's kind of a bad word in the U.S. Because people, the doctors in particular, say, well, you're going to take my creativity away if I have to practice with standard work. But yet medicine is all about standard work, right? We use the evidence all the time. That's how we treat patients. Why wouldn't we use standard work for everything else that we do for patients? It's part of the problem is we don't have standard work for most of what we do when patients come to the hospital or to the clinic. So we did this for a few months. We ran this experiment in 12 beds in one of our hospitals. Not hundreds of beds, 12 beds. A small test of change experiment. When we ran it for 11 months, we had 1,500 patients in the first year that went through this new process of standard work. And this is what we found. That when we started, we had one defect per patient stay as it related to medication reconciliation. So we were 100% reliable at being unreliable. Okay? Which is why we did this work, because we were unreliable. But in this first year when we actually ran it, we basically went to zero. And for the next 9 years, actually we have data that goes through this year now, we've had 0 MedRec errors in this collaborative care unit. 0 for 9 years in a row. It proves that this set of standard work that we've been creating using this methodology can get us to 0. Okay, but here's the real problem as it relates to standard work. You know, clinicians can understand standard work. They can understand it, and when we teach it, we understand it. But you know what? Managers and executives don't have a clue. And that's the problem. There are no standards for managers and executives. And in fact, Peter Drucker, who I love this quote. I read all of Peter Drucker's work. Peter Drucker actually worked with Toyota in the 1970s to help rebuild or to improve their management system. Most of what we call management consists of making it difficult for people to get their work done. I was a clinician for almost 20 years. This is exactly what I thought of management. Okay? I was an internist. And one of the operations directors would always come to me every year from the hospital and say, "Doctor, how can we make your life better in the hospital?" And I'd say the same thing every year for almost 20 years, and it never changed. So I really believe this. So the question was, why couldn't that vice president of operations ever fix the one thing that I asked for 20 years? And I finally figured it out. They didn't have any system. They didn't have any standard work. They didn't have anything. They were just flying by the seat of their pants, trying to get through the day every day, just like me, the doctor. So what we needed to do was create some standards in management, and that's what we've been really working on. That's why I say this is the secret sauce. Because if we as managers and executives can actually figure out how to build a system that works for our frontline staff, then we can start to see them identify and solve problems every day. If we don't do that, they don't have time, because they're just running around like chickens with their head cut off. In a continuous improvement culture, what we've been creating is this idea that when there is a red dot, it's good, because it allows you to identify and solve the problem immediately so it doesn't get passed on to the next patient. That's the thinking behind Lean, is visualization of problems so that it doesn't get passed on to the next patient. He told me years ago, you have to say yes to these 3 questions. Are my staff and doctors treated with dignity and respect by everyone? You have to say yes to this every day. Do my staff and doctors have the tools, training, and encouragement to do work that gives their life meaning? Now, I think, my hypothesis is, if we as leaders came in and used that second question every day, we would lead differently. We would lead differently. Do the people that I'm responsible for have the tools, training, and encouragement to do work that gives their life meaning? And finally, can we just celebrate, say thank you for all the great work our teams do every day? They avoid a lot of problems by their heroics. And what we have to do is now build systems so they don't have to be heroes. And this is what I learned was, here's how I was trained, okay? So when we think about it from a leadership behavior standpoint, right? I was trained to be all-knowing, in charge, autocratic, buck stops with me, impatient, blaming. That's how I was trained. That was the behavior modeled for me by my professors. Okay? In this new world, look what we have to be. Students, teachers, mentors, coaches. Totally different. 180 degrees different than the way I was trained. That's why this is hard. Because change is great, and I have to.